Welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Sebbing, and welcome to the Burst Block of the Month video tutorial series. This block of the month is a little bit different than the block of the months I've done in the past, in that the blocks don't exactly form your traditional star block. They each have kind of a log cabin shape to them with points, and then when you put them all together, they form this fun burst that's going out in the barn raising pattern. So it's kind of a log cabin, but it's kind of twisted to be more modern and fresh and fun. And speaking of fresh, we are using Fresh Batiks from Clothworks. It is the botanical series, and I was really excited when they wanted to work with me to do a block of the month. Their batiks are really pretty, and they pretty much just told me to have fun and create something. So we ended up with 2 different colorways for this block of the month. We already took signups earlier this year, but if you are interested in getting this block of the month and getting it in nice little lovely packets like this, this is the block 1A and B packet for the dark version. You can see it's really nice. It comes in a nice plastic sleeve. It tells you what block it is. So if you don't get to it right away, it's okay. Your fabric isn't all smushed together and you don't know what goes with what, and you get exactly what you need plus 1 extra inch. So if you cut something funny, you're good to go. Like I said, we already took signups for this, but there are quilt shops all across the country that are doing this, so you may be able to get in on one at your local quilt shop. Just tell them you want to do the burst block of the month with Clothworks, and if that doesn't work, we're probably going to do a round 2. We'll have a link in the video to go with this, and on our website at quiltaddictsanonymous.com, where you can sign up to be on a wait list to do this again. If we get enough interest, we'll do it again. Clothworks is bringing in some more fabric later this year, so we can get in on that and do a round 2. Alright, so here's what it looks like if you sign up for the block of the month. It's really fun, and it comes with our book. So this book is really special because it's 2-sided. So if you're doing the light version, then you have all the instructions for the light fabric. We start off with our cutting instructions and go all the way through to final assembly. And if you're following along, it's really great because you've got everything in the exact colors you need. So that way you don't have to worry about figuring out what swatch is supposed to go where. Like matching color 1 to the right one. You know, you've got it. Now, here's the fun part. So if we flip this over, we have the same information, but in a dark colorway. Now this is really important because the pressing directions are going to vary a little bit from the dark version to the light, because we want to make sure that we get those seams pressed underneath the dark side of the fabric. So that's going to be opposite if you're doing the dark version versus the light version. So check it out. This is also available at local quilt shops, or you can get it at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. If you are following along or you want to get in on the subscription later on, then you'll get one of these with your subscription. So that's cool. So check out the book. You will definitely need this to get everything correct when we do our instructions. So I'm going to make block 1A today for the demonstration, and I'm going to do it in the dark version. Now the instructions are the same for block 1B for the dark version and for blocks 1A and B for the light version, but again, those pressing instructions may be a little different. I'm going to switch back and forth as I do these tutorials between the dark and the light version, so you'll kind of get the hang of it depending on which one you're doing. But again, make sure that you are really following along with that book, because that's going to be really important. These videos are supposed to be complementary to the book. They're not supposed to be the end-all be-all. All your cutting instructions are going to be there. All your measurements are going to be in there. And in this case, a lot of these end up being mirror image, so you really need the reference of the book to go to make sure you have everything going in the right direction, so that all your points will go in the right direction in the end. So definitely get that book. It's the Burst Block of the Month book. You can ask at your local quilt shop. It's available all over, as well as at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. All right, well, let's get started here. So a couple of things you're going to find useful if you are doing this at home. There is a lot of marking. So a nice little small square is great to use with this. We have the Olfa 4.5-inch square at the shop. That's at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. I really liked using it for marking these because we've got a lot of tiny little 2.5-inch lines to do, and this was a great size to work with, as well as when we trim later. You definitely are going to need some pins. If you are doing the light version, we're going to be marking a lot of seams to sew on. So these, I'm going to say this wrong, I know. Friction gel pens are great because you can draw your line on and then you can iron it away and it'll be like it never existed. They do come back, the lines will come back in freezing temperatures, but this is going to be on the wrong side of the quilt, so you're probably never going to see it. And you can always just iron it off later anyway. These Clover chalk wheels are also great if you are doing the dark version because you're going to be able to mark really easily on it, and this pink one shows up great, but they come in other colors as well. Again, we've got all this stuff at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, or you can check out your local quilt shop and see it there as well. So I'm going to start with step 1. So the first thing that we need to do is I'm going to move some of these things out of the way. We don't need them just yet. So I need to mark this seam. Now if I was worried using the light version, I would use my gel pen, but that's not going to show up on these dark seams. So what I need to do is take my chalk tool and I'm going to line my ruler up from corner to corner on the wrong side of these. I'm going to kind of just take that wheel and go out from center. So now I've got a great line there that I can use as my guide when I sew on, and it's chalk so it comes off really easily when you're done. Okay, so we've got that ready to go. Now here's where it's really important to refer to your book, because depending on which one you're doing, which strip you're using, this line is going to go in a different direction. So we have 2 different width strips here, and one is going to go in one direction and the other is going to go in the other direction. See, we have our line, one is going up, one is going down, and that really matters a whole lot when you are doing this. Otherwise your points are not going to show up in the right spot. See, when we do this, our points are now flipping in opposite directions. So make sure you pay attention to your book instructions whenever you are sewing any of these diagonal seams on. They're not hard, you just have to pay attention and then you'll be good to go. Now, what you can do with this, if you're worried about this slipping on you, is you can get your corners nice and lined up and just put a little pin in the center, and that'll keep everything nice and lined up until you can get it sewn over. You can avoid doing this if you want as well, if you feel really confident in your ability to hold this together. You don't have to pin, you can skip that step. Now when I was sewing this, I was sewing it on the baby lock that you're used to seeing on all of my other video tutorials, but I had been kind of bad to that machine and the feed dogs weren't working properly. So I found that I needed to start with, not with the point. So I found that my feed dogs would not take it if I would put that point in first. So I started all my seams here, so the needle would come in from here and then I would sew to the point. And that worked a lot better when my feed dogs were not working very well. So that machine is actually at the sewing machine hospital right now, and I bought my very first backup, so I'm pretty excited about that. I got the Baby Lock Rachel. I've done 2 quilts on it and binding so far, and I really like it. For a mid-price machine, actually kind of a lower end price machine, it really does great for just straight piecing. So if that's all you need it for, this is a good machine to do. Now I need to set this so that my needle is in the center, and that's different than most quilting stitches. Normally we are at the 1/4 inch stitch, and we will get there, but for this part it's a little easier if you have your machine in the center. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to line up my needle so that it's going to be coming down right on top of that line that we drew. And then I'm just going to go ahead and sew forward. Actually, that one, perfect example. We did it on camera. I kind of crunched up my fabric. The feed dogs didn't want to take it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this around, and I'm going to go ahead and sew from the back out. And that just gives your feed dogs a little something to hang on to, because you actually have a little bit of fabric back there. And so it makes it a little easier to get it moving. You absolutely can chain piece these. Just line the next one up, lift your press foot up and slide it so that it's right on that line, and then guide it through. Take your needle out if you went ahead and pinned that in place. You don't ever want to sew over a needle. Alright, so I'm going to do something real quick before I do this. What I'm doing is I'm flipping my triangle open, and then I'm just going to check and make sure that it is going in the right direction as it's supposed to on the directions. So let's just give this a quick little double check. And in this case it is. So when I compare these to the directions on my book, I have these triangles in the right side of the rectangle. You want to make sure you do that beforehand, because once you trim this off, you can't fix it. You're going to have to start over. So double check always with your book to make sure that you are in the right spot before you trim this off. And that's going to happen for every single step. And don't worry, the directions remind you on every single step to check them out. Alright, so now for this one, because this is the dark version, I'm going to go ahead and press this so that the seams are underneath my dark triangles. Now, if I had the light version, that's going to be opposite. So again, make sure you refer to your burst pattern book to go with this to make sure that you are getting this right. So that's going pretty quick. We've got 2 down and 3 to go, or 4 to go technically. So this might look a little different than what you're used to. I'm going to go ahead and start with my longer orange strip because I need to have different sized pieces to go with that. So in this case, I need a 4-inch, 4.5 inch, and I need to mark that again. So it's a little different this time because it's not a square. So what we're aiming for here is to make sure that our line comes out where the tip of this rectangle is. So you can see if we were to line this up, then that would come in line there. So the easiest way to do that is to take your 45-degree line and line it up with the edge of this dark blue or white if you're doing the light version. And then I'm going to have the tip of that right at the tip of my rectangle, and then ideally this should come out at the 2.5 inch mark on your other part line. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in this. Again, you can skip this step if you are really confident that you're going to be able to get this in the right section. Now this is going to be opposite for the next one because our block is a little shorter and we need to go in the other direction. We still have our 4.5, but it's going to go in the opposite direction. So that's why it's really important to look at your book as you are doing this to make sure you have everything going the way it's supposed to be. Otherwise you're going to end up with points going in the wrong direction and you're going to be ripping a lot. But if you just refer to your book as you're doing this, then it's going to be really easy. I'm actually going to flip this around so you're not looking at my arm to do this. Okay, so in this case I've got it lined up. Got off a little there, but that's okay. Alright, so now we've got that lined up. I have my lines to sew on, and we can come back over to the sewing machine. Okay, it's time to sew these together again, and I'm going to go ahead and put the back end through first. I'm not going to start with a point, which I guess there isn't really one on this one, so it's a little easier. But just start out slow. Make sure those feed dogs grab it. You can remove your fabric, pin, Now, if I were doing this to make the quilt, I would do all of these that I need to do at once, and then I would move on to the next step. I wouldn't do it one at a time like I'm doing here. This is just for the video. But you definitely will save a lot of time if you prep all of these at once and then chain piece them all at the same time. So again, if I bring this over, I want to double check that these are going in the right direction. So I'm looking, in this case it's step 9, and this one is going in the right direction. And then if I hop down to step 12, I can see that this one's going in the right direction. So I'm good to trim. But definitely double check that before you cut anything, or you might be sad. So when I trim these, I'm just trimming them to 1/4 inch. And it's not super important that you're really accurate at this point, but you just don't want to have too skinny or too fat of a seam. But the accuracy is in that line that we sewed. All right, we're going to give these a little quick press to get them to stand up. So you can see we really don't have to use any special templates to create this. It's just kind of like sewing half square triangles, but a little different. So it's pretty similar. All right, let's get those off to the side and move on to the next step. Okay, so we've now reached the inner point of our burst. And so I need to do the tiny little points here. So we have a nice long piece and a shorter piece to work with. And again, make sure you're referring to your diagrams in the book so that you know what's what for that. So these two are going to go together just like this. I'm actually going to repin that a little bit because it wasn't quite on. Don't want to be off when I'm sewing this. And then this is the one part where it's different. So in this case, this is too tiny to put something over it and be accurate. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to take my gel pen and I'm going to mark it from point to point, just like we did for those first ones, so I can get a nice line there to draw on. And then I'm going to refer to my instructions on which way to lay this, so that way everything goes in the right direction. So again, you really need to get the book for this. If you normally just figure stuff out from the video, you might be sorry if you don't spend the money to get the book. All right, we've got one last one to go, and then all of our kind of log cabin peaks are ready to go. So I'm gonna give this a quick adjustment. If you ever are going through here and your line isn't showing up right at the point, you can just give it a little smidge, just move it over a little bit and adjust it. So that way the tip of that line is also on the tip of the fabric that's below it. You absolutely can do that if that's what it takes. Remember, this is sewing on the bias, and that can be a scary word because sometimes things don't behave the way they should on the bias, but it also means that you get a little bit extra forgiveness. So if you're a little off, sometimes you can make it work by just pressing it a little bit more to get it the way you want it to be. All right, so again, I'm gonna refer to my book. I'm gonna check and make sure that my angle's going in the right way. And if I flip this one over, again, that it's going the right direction, that it looks the same as the diagram in the book. So make sure that you do that before you cut off anything, or you might be sad. So we're good there. So we're gonna trim these to 1/4 inch. If you are someone who really loves to keep their little scraps, you could really have a lot of fun with these little triangles. There are going to be lots of them, and if you trim everything nice, and they're all going to be the same size, so you will be able to have a lot of fun with those little guys. All right, so we're going to give those another press. Again, for this dark version, we're going to put that underneath, that seam underneath the dark blue fabric. If you have the light version, it's going to be opposite, but that is all marked out really clearly in your pattern book, so make sure that you follow along with that. All right, so we've got all of our little strips ready and we're ready to start putting the block together. It's like I said, it's kind of like a log cabin if you've ever done one of those when you're putting it together. And it really goes pretty quickly from this point. So number one, make sure you turn your machine to sew a 1/4 inch stitch. Because now is the point where we actually are using that 1/4 inch stitch because we want to have a 1/4 inch seam line so this block turns out the right size. The thing we're going to do is we're going to flip up our shortest little strip. And here is the biggest tip ever. So if these guys don't end up perfectly straight on the edge, you can fudge that. You don't have to make this end perfect if you are having trouble doing that. Because sometimes when you do a log cabin, things kind of don't go together perfectly at the end, and sometimes that's you and sometimes it's your machine. Who knows? But sometimes that happens. So what you want to do is you want to get this end first, because if you start here, then when you sew to the edge, if this end is off a little bit, not a big deal. If this end is off, you're really going to be able to tell. So always start with the printed end and end with the background side. So to do that, I'm going to stitch with the dark side up. And we'll just start sewing. And again, if you can chain stitch this, that's going to make everything go a lot faster for you. So just get everything ready and sew it all at once. There are really specific pressing instructions, and it is different depending on whether you're doing the light or dark version. So I'm not going to tell you which way to go, just make sure you refer to your book so you know which direction is working for you. All right, we've got this piece together, so now it's the same length as the one next to it. Now, if you want to pin these, you absolutely can. I generally don't. I don't like to pin if I don't have to. So we're going to bring this over. And again, we're going to start with this printed side, so that way if this end is off a little bit, not a big deal. This end is the one that matters. All right, time to press this. And again, make sure you refer to your book to figure out what way you're supposed to press it, because that's going to vary whether you're using the light or dark version. So the rest of this block goes together pretty much the same way, where you're going to be adding one from the bottom and then one from the left. And so we're going to do this part in a little bit of fast forward. So you'll still see everything that we do, but I'm not going to stop and give you each step because you've got the book to help you, and it really is the exact same steps as we just did, just with a little bit longer strips. So here we go. So this is it. We made block 1A. Again, the instructions are the exact same for 1B and 1A and 1B for the light version, just the fabrics are different. And you'll be able to figure all that out if you are using your book to follow along. Again, I just can't say more about this book. I am so excited to be able to offer books instead of downloadable PDFs. This is great. I can't tell you how many emails I get like years later when the patterns are no longer on the website and people can't get them and they're really upset. So get a book and then you'll always have the book and your computer won't crash and you'll lose it. You'll just have it. So that's great. And really it's great because it's full color and you have all these great instructions to show you exactly what you need, and it shows you exactly what swatches you're using, so there's no guesswork to figure out what fabric goes where. And again, we have the dark version and the light version, and full color instructions for every step of the way for both of them. So you actually are getting, how many did it end up being? 24 pages of instruction for each colorway. So if you want to make this choice, you can, and you have 48 pages to work with. So check it out. Again, this is available at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and it also is available at quilt shops across the country. So just go in and ask for it. It's the Burst Block of the Month with Clothworks and Quilt Addicts Anonymous. So check that out. And again, if you want to get fabric for this, check out your local quilt shop. They probably have some. If not, you can ask them to order it. And if that won't work, then we probably are going to do a round 2 of this late in the year, maybe starting in November. So keep an eye on that, and we'll have a link where you can sign up just saying that you're interested. It doesn't commit you to anything, just says you're interested, you want to know when we start a new one. So that way you're first to know and you're able to get signed up, because this does sell out pretty quickly. Alright, well, thanks so much for following along, and just keep tuned for the instructions for block 2. We're going to sew that one in the light colorway. This is the colorway that most of you guys love. I love the darker colorway better, but definitely the light version is the one that most of you guys are loving. So we're going to make it in that one for block 2. Thanks so much for following along. Make sure you visit quiltaddictsanonymous.com, where you can get lots of other tips and tricks and great tutorials, and subscribe to my channel so you can get lots of other good quilting tips and tricks. Thanks for following along, and happy quilting.